The hotel room was silent, too silent for what had just happened. The silk sheets were tangled, a bra dangled from the lamp, and the scent of sweat and perfume lingered in the heavy air. Jason Carter sat at the edge of the bed, head in his hands, staring at the floor like it might offer answers. Beside him, Isabella Reyes lit a cigarette with trembling fingers, her bare back arched like a question mark against the dim city lights. Neither of them spoke. Because both of them knew, it wasn't supposed to happen again. Not after what it cost them the first time. Jason Carter wasn't a bad man, not really. He was a 34-year-old corporate lawyer in Chicago with a penthouse apartment, a six-figure salary, and a fiancée waiting at home who wore pearls to brunch and dreamed in Pinterest boards. He had everything that made for the perfect American success story. But perfection bored him. Enter Isabella Reyes. She was everything Jason wasn't. A 28-year-old Cuban-American artist with paint under her nails, poetry in her voice, and fire behind her eyes. She worked odd jobs to survive, sold her art in underground galleries, and drove a rusted-out Buick with duct tape on the window. She didn't care about status. She cared about passion. And from the moment their eyes locked at a charity event, him in a tuxedo, her serving wine in a backless black dress, they knew. This wasn't going to end well. But they didn't care. What started as stolen glances became midnight text messages, which spiraled into motel rooms and breathless confessions. Jason told himself it was just lust. A temporary escape. But Isabella wasn't someone you escaped from. She consumed. With her, Jason laughed differently. He lived differently. He started skipping meetings, ignoring his mother's calls, lying to his fiancée with increasing ease. And when guilt clawed at his throat, Isabella would press her lips against it, and he'd forget again. But lust, real lust, doesn't stay hidden forever. The fallout began on a Sunday afternoon. Jason's fiancée, Emily, found one of Isabella's earrings in the glove compartment. Delicate. Silver. Handmade. Not hers. Jason tried to lie, said it was a client's, a gift he hadn't delivered. But Emily had spent 4 years reading his eyes. This time, they didn't match the script. She didn't scream. She simply whispered, "How long?" That silence, it hurt more than any slap. When she walked out the door, she took more than her engagement ring. She took the future Jason had carefully built. Jason spiraled. He moved into a hotel, stopped shaving, started drinking. He blamed Isabella, then hated himself for blaming her. She'd never promised him forever. She'd promised only fire, and he had willingly stepped into the flames. But Isabella wasn't unaffected. For weeks, she avoided his calls. The guilt of being the other woman gnawed at her. She'd lost lovers before, but this one had wrecked her in ways she didn't understand. She tried to paint, but the canvas stared back blank. She tried to move on, but every man she met felt hollow. Then one rainy night, she showed up at the hotel room door, drenched and shaking. "I didn't mean to ruin you," she said softly. "But I didn't mean to fall in love either." Jason didn't reply. He just pulled her in, not out of lust, but something gentler. Something closer to need. But love built on broken glass doesn't heal easily. They tried to make it work. Jason got a new job at a smaller firm. Isabella started selling again. They moved into a one-bedroom apartment in Wicker Park, surrounded by mismatched furniture and second-hand dreams. But the cracks were everywhere. He was used to control, to structure, to plans. She was chaos, emotion, unpredictability. They fought over groceries. Over bills. Over the past. Jason would flinch at Emily's name when it popped up in mutual friends' social media. Isabella would go cold when he'd get too quiet, convinced he regretted choosing her. They were drowning, even though they'd already burned. The turning point came during Isabella's art exhibit. Jason arrived late, again, after an exhausting meeting with a potential client. He wore a wrinkled shirt and a tired apology. Isabella's eyes met his from across the gallery, and he could see it, the disappointment. The ache. When he approached, she didn't greet him with anger. She simply showed him the final piece she'd painted. It was titled Tamed by Lust. The canvas was raw, abstract swirls of red and gray. Passion and restraint. In the center, two silhouettes stood close, but not touching. Bound not by ropes, but by invisible chains. Jason stared at it for a long time. And then he asked the question he'd been too afraid to ask since the beginning. Do I make you better, Isabella? Her answer was quiet. Honest. Sometimes. But sometimes, you make me smaller. That night, they sat on the floor of their apartment and had the conversation they'd avoided for months. About who they were. About what they wanted. And about how love should never feel like a war zone. They cried. Laughed. Let years of shame spill out. And for the first time, they didn't have sex. They just talked. The next morning, Isabella moved out. Not in anger. But in clarity. They agreed to heal apart. To find out if what they had was truly love, or just lust disguised in poetry. It took nearly a year. Jason started therapy. Rebuilt friendships. Learned how to be alone without needing someone to fill the silence. Isabella traveled. Painted in Italy. Fell in love with herself again. They didn't text. Didn't call. Until one spring afternoon, Jason walked into a bookstore and found a copy of Tamed by Lust, a collection of essays and art by Isabella Reyes. Inside the dedication read, "To the man who taught me how to burn, and then taught me how to breathe again." He smiled. Because this time, he didn't feel regret. He felt peace. Lust can light the fire, but only truth can keep it warm. Love isn't about possession, it's about growth. Sometimes, the most passionate chapters in our lives are the ones that teach us to finally let go, so we can become who we were meant to be.